Hanging Out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
So on our Hanging Out feature this morning, we've got the former board chairperson of Eskom, Mpho Makwana. He's taken a bit of a break lately since his resignation from Eskom, and I've been talking to him, trying to get him to studio, and I'm so glad I managed to do it before the end of the year, because had I not gotten him this year, I don't think I would have gotten him to come next year. But a prolific businessman. I know some of you may probably know him in a position that he held at Eskom as the board chair, or the position he held at Eskom back in 2009 and 2010 when he was CEO and he was board chairperson. But this is someone who has been in executive and C-suite roles in the public and private sectors for over 26 years. And he's currently serving on several boards as well of a number of companies. And he's going to be hanging out with us this hour. Thank you very much for making time, Mr. Makwana. We've been working on this for a while.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manyathela, for having me on your show.
Can I just say how excited I was to realize you are from Jane Fess?
Yes.
In Limpopo.
Yes.
I was like, because for the longest time, I thought you must be Swati or maybe Zulu, but not Zulu from KZN, like Joburg Zulu, if you know what I mean. Because there's a level of aggressiveness, man, about Bapedi, people from Limpopo, in their tone, and not that they're aggressive people. And you've always, like, you're so soft-spoken, you're so calm, and I've always thought you must be Swati.
No, Kimupedi Twi. But one of the songs I asked you asked me for some songs. Yeah. One of the songs I provided you is probably one of the cultural and spiritual symbols of that calmness that you're referring to.
And I can't wait to play. I tell the listeners earlier that you've sent us some wonderful songs that we'll get to play during in between our conversation. So you were born in Pretoria, but you grew up in Jane Fess. Just help us understand.
I was born, actually, yes, in the western part of Pretoria, in Lady Selborne, at the Holy Cross Hospital, some 53 years ago. And when I was born, we still had the apartheid system. So my birth certificate could not reflect that I was born in a white area.
Oh.
So my mother at the time was training at the nursing college in Kalafong Hospital. I was then registered as born in Kalafong, Atteridgeville.
Ah, I see. So you were registered as in Atteridgeville. That's interesting. What an interesting story. You know, sometimes we take these things for granted. You know, every time I host people your age, and I'm not saying you're old, but I'm sometimes like taken aback by some of the things today we think are the most simplest and basic things, like being born in a hospital. Like, why must it matter that I'm born in a hospital that is a white area or a black or... So I suppose that what I'm saying is when I hear these stories, that makes me appreciate this democracy even more and the freedom that we have. How was it growing up in Jane Fess? How was your childhood, and what kind of dreams did you have?
I had a conventional, traditional childhood. So growing up in Jane Fess, I grew up in my father's home. But my grandfather's house was within walking distance, so every day I saw my grandparents. I had a very close, loving relationship with my grandmother on the paternal side. Then twice a year, I would see, we called them Raholo and Koko of Pretoria. So I would see my maternal grandparents from Pretoria, but actually they originally come from Rampahlele. My maternal grandfather comes from Seleteng, Rampahlele. My maternal grandmother comes from Amaribana, past Muleji, from the Mujapilo clan. So I grew up close to my paternal grandmother's family, the Petla family, the Makwana family, the Mpahlele, Patudi families, on my maternal side, and the Mujapelo families on my grandmother's, maternal grandmother's side. It was a rich childhood. In Jane First itself, Jane First was a melting pot of cultures. The name Jane First of the village, people always ask me, why does a village in Sekhukhune have a Scottish name? Dr. John First was the first doctor in the hospital there in the early 60s. The village Jane First built itself around the hospital, started growing from around 1966.
Yeah.
There was Scottish missionaries through the Anglican Church that came and set up mission. The original name of Jane First is Mashadi. And so in Mashadi, the Scots set up this mission, and around 1969, thereabouts, towards 1970, Dr. John First's daughter, Jane, became the first patient to be admitted for a lengthy period in the hospital, as it was beginning to operate. She had polio, and she died of polio. Even today, if you go to the old hospital, you'll still find her gravesite. So the hospital then became known as Jane First Memorial Hospital. And the village then just got called Jane First.
Mashadi Nilima.
Mashadi has to do with the old battles that were fought during the Squati Mampuru. Jane First is under the rule of Kgoshi Squati Mampuru. So Mashadi has to do with those who were in Bashala when battles were fought. Because it was a small village, there weren't many men in Jane First until it became a place of convergence because of work and employment being created by the hospital. The second part of Jane First is that it was a point of convergence in terms of bus stops and transportation. So if you remember the old Mjanji buses under the South African Railway Services, and also there was an old company called NRC, the National Roads Council, which tended to provide black people with transport. So if you worked in Middelburg, if you worked in Witbank, if you worked in Bronkhorstspruit, Pretoria, Joburg, Jane First was the intersection point. The buses would drop you there. Then you would get transport that takes you to Driekop, that takes you to Steelpoort, that takes you to Amarishane, Amasemola, and all the surrounding areas. And so it had a huge sort of transport intersection role in it. And so even the earliest form of urban tendencies, the notion of Otsarapo and all those things, most people in that neighborhood, in that rural environment, would have learned them in Jane First, because that's where you would have had these
What's
buses.
What's Otsarapo in English?
Pickpocketing.
Oh, pickpocketing. There we go. Yeah.
So it was a melting pot in that sense.
Yeah.
Equally, people from the east side, Lydenburg, Beggersfort, and Restplas, all the eastern towns, Nelspruit as well. To your point earlier about the Swati, most of Swati-speaking people in Jane First would also have come through that point of interchange. So in Jane First, you get people who speak Setsonga, who speak Seswati, who speak Sepedi A, as they would remind you. And also through the Methodist Church, we then got Xhosa-speaking nationals from the Eastern Cape and other parts of our country through the Methodist Church missionary work. You also had a very strong Lutheran Church presence. One of the profound Lutheran Church priests of our times was Ntate Dean Minele, who was a very riveting community leader.
I wonder how related he is to Daniel Minele.
His father.
Really? Because I recently, were you not at the Nedbank golf tournament in Sun City?
Yes,
You were, right?
I'm a regular there.
Yeah, I think we spoke.
My blood is green, as
yes,
you know.
Mr. Yeah. Is it green and black as well? And a little bit of red? Or just green?
No, let's not go there.
Anyway, Daniel Minele, I was with him there at the Nedbank Golf, and he was telling me that he's from that place. So when you mention it, I'm like, oh, he did say. Oh, it was his dad. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, let's go to one of your songs, because we've got so much to talk about. A lot of people are impressed by how much you know about your roots. Makhosi says, Clement, that's such a rich childhood. Knowing your maternal and paternal roots is something most of us lack. It's often more over to either as opposed to both. I loved how he positioned who he is based on where he also comes from. God bless him and his family there. That's a message from Makhosi from Midrand. So I want us to start with this song, and you will explain to us what it is, why it is so special to you. Umohau wa Modimo. So this is the IPCC tribute to Priscilla Malete.
Yes, the title of the song is O Mohau wa Modimo, O Grace of God. In our community, in the International Pentecost Holiness Church, so there's confusion. The church choir is called IPCC, International Pentecost Church Choir. But the church is IPHC, International Pentecost Holiness Church. So this is almost like our national anthem. Every service on the Sabbath, we observe the Sabbath, as in worship on Saturday.
Yeah.
Every service we start, without fail, starts with this song. It basically says God's grace is a privilege. But it assures us that the turbulence we've passed through previously, it almost takes you to that thought that says the will of God will not take you where the grace of God cannot protect you. So we all have scars from our past. In my family, we had, in spite of the rich upbringing that I shared with you, my parents joined the faith when I was 7 because there were certain challenges in their lives that they could not resolve through conventional Christianity. And so it was only when they became part of the IPHC many years ago when I was 7 that they started seeing a remarkable difference in their lives. So it's a song that inspires us to know that it doesn't matter what danger you face, what trouble you face, God's grace is always there.
Do you think that's what sustained you as well over the years? Because there have been challenges personally, at work.
It's a source of courage. It's a source of assurance. It's a piece of music that says, doesn't matter what stands in front of you, everything is going to be all right.
You play tennis.
I do.
You still play today?
I've been playing since I was 9. I learned to play tennis at Jane First. My father had friends.
People know about tennis in 1999.
A lot actually.
Really?
My father started the sport inspired by friends that he went with to Bupedi High School. And it was a boarding school in Amarishane that a lot of people, few prominent people come from Bupedi. But there was as I said, Jane First was a melting pot. There was the family, the Tayop family. They generally known in our neighborhood as the Abu brothers because of their father Abu Tayop. The Tayop families, the brothers Satar, Harun, and Aziz were close to my father and his peers, and they kept this sense of diversity. Every Sunday there was this community around tennis in the hospital. And so from age 9, I was inspired to play. And so high school, I played a little bit of tennis. At university, I even became captain of the university team at Ongoye when I was a student.
Yeah,
So even today, I still play tennis.
it's like high level stuff, eh? I wouldn't play with you as a beginner who's just recently is learning.
I'm a
this.
graceful
Are you?
opponent.
Okay. Oh, that's really fascinating. That's fascinating. My thing about tennis is I feel like I've just run 42 kilometers. And maybe it's because I'm beginning, but it's so draining. It's a full body workout. Actually, that's what it is.
Yeah. It's a wonderful sport. You can play it more or less until about age 80. Some after age 70 slow down. I mean, you playing, it's a mental game. It's a hand-eye foot coordination. It's about rhythm. But as you say, you do all those things and you burn lots of calories in the process.
You're having fun while burning calories.
Good morning, Clement. My name is Sedlo. So Mpo was my senior at high school. So nearly the comrade. I leave it at that. So I hope, as part of your conversation, you will touch on that. But the question that I really would like to pose to him, does he not feel that his very strong religious views, and he doesn't hide it, does he not think it's potentially a problem in the corporate world? Let me leave it at that.
Hi Clement, that makwala go potsa ko gae nna ke tswa mo Mosperlosi wa tseba ha ba pala pina tse kholo tsa ntate Modise Frederick Samuel o ngopotsa mepa me moder ke re ngwana re a leboga monna geso o kwa ka ripa ya monna o swarutise go le wa kudu ko rena ba pedi. We thank you very much for rich history that you've given us. O tswele pele mana geso o shate
Moshate. Hey.
I'm still in touch with home.
Yeah.
I'm in touch with, as far as the pinnacle, the royal court, Kamshaletsi.
Yeah.
As and when I have an opportunity, I go and pay tribute. The leadership, the elders of our people, our Bedi Kingdom, we are related with them through my mother. My mother's clan praise name, Moramadi Amogale. And so Moramadi the Great, her grandmother, was from Raskukune, daughter from the royal family there. And her grandfather, Khoshi Mutle III, was Khoshi of the Patudim Pahlele clan. So we are cousins, the Patudim Pahleles and Skukunes are cousins. So as and when I have an opportunity to go and pay homage, I never miss that opportunity. In fact, 2 years or so ago, I went 1 January, Bampangu. For New Year's, and we took it home, and it became our Sishebo.
Sishebo for Christmas.
For New Year's.
For New Year's, nice. It's 10:32. We're gonna get the latest.
Hanging out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
23 minutes before 11 o'clock on our Hanging Out feature this morning, Mpho Makwana, the former Eskom board chairperson. My goodness, so many people are appreciating the history lesson. They didn't know how Jane First was founded, so a lot of people are appreciating that. I want you to quickly respond to what Silo said, who says you were his senior in school. Arnole comrade. Yeah? Were you like those people who were organizing the protest back in the day?
He is right. He just didn't give us the privilege of knowing his surname. So I truly cut my teeth at a school I went to in Lewachomo, SJ van der Merwe Technical High School. We had, at that time, between 1982 and 1986, there was a point when we had SANDF, was it SANDF or SADF, SADF?
At the time, yeah, SADF.
Soldiers teaching us as our teachers. So in 1983, we had this incident where they wanted to almost enforce the rules that used to apply or were meant to apply in 1976 to use Afrikaans as the medium of instruction in the school, which would have meant that we would only have done English in class only, and everywhere else we would be spoken to in Afrikaans and spoke Afrikaans. The headmaster at the time was Mr. D.C. Benade. Bless his soul, he's since passed on. And so that just ignited an anger in us. There were two fellow students who came from Mamelodi, I guess inspired by the history of Solomon Mahlangu. They had been exposed to Xhosas, which already then had been banned. So we could not call our branch Xhosas. We had to wait until there was a relaunch of Xhosas here at Bosmont High School here next to Maraiburg, that some of us came and attended. And then when we got back to SJ, it was relaunched as South African Students Congress. It had been relaunched nationally, so we then created a branch. And I was one of many that were recruited to join. We joined and started conscientizing each other around, again, the spirit of each one, teach one, and all those things.
Yeah.
In 1986, then, when the country was in that state of the emergency regulations, I got detained together with others. We spent about 6 months or so under the emergency regulations detention. And actually, that's where my career path changed.
After the detention?
Because, until that July of 1986, when we were detained, I was in my matric year in 86. I was preparing to write matric so I could become an electric engineer. Being a technical high school, we did electronics. So while in prison, I got exposed to a very group of interesting people. One of them had come from Robben Island, the late Thabo Makunyan. We called him the rabbi. He had a distinguished beard like yours and had this wisdom about him. And so we teased him and said he's like a rabbi. And as you were taken through thoughts of political conversation known as generalism Mkhabulo, one got to appreciate more about the economy and how it works and why it matters. And I almost felt I had to choose between being involved in driving all matters, economic and managerial leadership, versus going, at the time, it seemed like being an engineer, you were just going to be stuck at the shop floor in a factory without having the direction of the means of production. And so I ended up changing my path. When I came out of prison, the following year, I did commercial subjects all in 1 year, in my matric year for the first time, and then completed my matric and ended up in a commercial career path.
Interesting. Please, can you put on your headphones? I want to take a call now from Malamula, who's calling us from Crystal Park. Malamula, good morning.
Good morning, Clement.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm all right. Go ahead.
I'm so excited that you brought Paul to your interview, Paul. I know him when he was very young. As he says, he used to go to the hospital. That's where I actually trained my midwifery in Jane Pierce. I know the parents. The father was a clerk at the hospital, and the mom was also a senior, one of the seniors, in the hospital. A matron, actually, we used to call them. And then, I don't know, I've met him at church because I was also at IPHC.
Yeah.
And then his father was also a minister there, a pastor there at the church. And I've spoken to Mpo several times to say, I know him when he was very young, when I was at church. I don't know if he will remember me. Yeah. I'm married to Lamula, one of the reverends there, also with him. So I'm
That's
very proud
wonderful.
of him and his journey. I know his wife, and we used to go to church also together with the wife. Yeah, and when he got married, I'm so excited for the song also.
Yes. Oh man, Malamula, thank you for calling us. That's so sweet. Yeah. So, do you regret taking the decision to go the commercial route?
No, I don't regret it whatsoever. And in a very strange way, in 2002, then my old electronics past reconnected with me at Eskom.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of people that I went to high school with are at Eskom currently.
So, and I wanted to raise the Eskom thing because that's a yearning, I imagine, to serve. I mean, even when you were brought back at Eskom to chair the board in, over a year ago, I remember what you had indicated in the beginning was, I want to serve this country. Do you think that has got roots to your days back in the day when you understood and you were conscientized and you understood the responsibility as an individual to the Republic?
My journey of contribution is quite lengthy. So when I got to Ongoye, the University of Zululand, I continued to be a student activist. With us were people like Me Batabile Dlamini, who were student peers in Sansko. There I met people like Deputy Minister Mahlobo. He was a year or so behind me in a different faculty, but we were all in the same Students' Congress. At the University of Natal, as it was known at the time, we had peers in Sansko at the REC level, Vusima Donsela, who's now in The Hague, and many others. I also got involved, as I indicated, I was active in sports with the National Sports Congress. We had a student chapter of it called SATISCO, South African Tertiary Institution Sports Council, and people like Mos Mashishi, who's also an avid tennis player, I met through SATISCO. And when you start correlating sport with struggle, that's where we were exposed to that dimension of contribution. If you then fast forward to World of Work, when I started working, I got involved with the Black Management Forum. I got to shape the implementation of the BMF's Basotho Head formula, which had a vision that between 1993 and 2000, you wanted to ensure that corporates that are listed on the JSE had 80% of their trainees being black, 30% of junior managers being black, all the way to the crown of the Basotho Head in terms of board representativity.
Is that when you were the head of the organizational transformation
division?
Okay.
Whilst involved there, when I joined the BMF had just had a dialogue the year prior that I joined with the economics divisions of the liberation movements at Mopani, where a document called the Mopani Record of Understanding was concluded around the transformation of the economy. And at that time, it was about economic empowerment, not even black economic empowerment. And so because of that close relationship, the president of the BMF at the time was Don Mukonazi. We called him the Lion of the Midlands. He came from Durban, but for some reason they made him compete for that title with Babu Kwala. But the point here is that I then got involved with the working committee on the RDP. We contributed to Chapter 2, which is about meeting basic needs, and also the chapter on the economy. And so at that time at Shell House, got to be mentored by people like Papi Muloto, who was the head of HR, Cheryl Carolus, who was the DSG at the time, head of social development portfolio, and Ndade Andile Ngaba, who was in the comms department. And so the journey of contributing to the transformation of the country is long, and that led me between 95 and 96 to be the first director for equal opportunities under Minister Tito Mboweni.
In the Department of
Labor.
Labor, yeah.
I set up the directorate from scratch at the time.
What's the difference between the ESCOM you served back in 2010, 2011, 2009 to the ESCOM you went back to a year ago?
The ESCOM of old, or the ESCOM we served between 2002 and 11, was a world-class top 10 performer in the world. It was a place where people came from various parts of the world. It's not known that even in nuclear, we were ranked among the top 3 because of the excellence at Kuberg. Today, the ESCOM we have continues to have resilient employees among its 40,000 odd. But sadly, it's bedeviled by challenges of malfeasance, corruption, because of the impact that state capture had on it.
Yeah. You were brought in at ESCOM to try and help get the company out of the rot and the damage that was inflicted by that state capture era. And you decided to leave. Was it in October when you decided to leave? This after you've served, what, just about a year? Why did you decide to leave then? Because it felt like you're not done with your work. It felt you came in because you wanted to see ESCOM through that difficult patch. And I mean, there have been some successes here and there, but I feel like your job was not done. So why did you decide to call it quits?
When you are invited to lead in environments like those, you find yourself in a particular ecosystem. And so to the extent that the ecosystem is no longer enabling of you to be an effective leader, the responsible thing to do for any leader is to read the situation correctly and remove yourself from the equation, especially when toxicity is created by whatever forces that cause that toxicity, and they start personalizing certain things to you that shouldn't be personalized to you. You then remind yourself that the reason you're there in the first place is to serve the best interest of the organization. And this organization being of such systemic importance to the country, you're there also to serve the best interest of the country. And to the extent that you feel that if you stay there, those two best interests will be undermined, it is best to step aside and let someone else move in. So that the job that is bigger than all of us continues to be fulfilled.
But can that job be fulfilled if the environment is still not enabling for people to do what they're there to do, and the toxicity is still there? I mean, even when you remove yourself, do you, understanding that environment, do you think anybody else would be able to operate and effectively contribute to changing this institution under the same environment?
So when you're a chair of a board, you're part of a collective of leaders on the board. You're part of a collective in the broader government space. And so to the extent that that collective embraces you, you should be able to lead. And so I believe that my successor has been embraced by that collective. He's been there from the beginning when we set up the turnaround plan for generations, where we had set out to ensure that you achieved 55, 60%, 65%, 70% energy availability factor. I believe that the collective will continue on that trajectory.
And you hope it's not going to be consumed by the toxicity and the environment that wasn't enabling.
It's a marathon, it's a relay race. This relay race is run if this was a stadium where you're running this relay race, it's got lots of complexity. So you pass the baton to the point where if you continue to feel healthy, emotionally happy to run the race. Once you feel like it's no longer practical for you to be the carrier of the baton, you hand it over to the next leader.
Let me ask this, and I'm going to try ask it in a more cautious way without mentioning names. Would you say to me that part of the reason for your departure, for the reasons you've mentioned around the toxic environment or the ecosystem that wasn't enabling of you to do your work, that was part of the reason for that was the interference by the shareholder?
There's nothing diplomatic about your question.
I tried. I can't go more diplomatic than that.
I think let's move on the basis that valuable lessons were learned. And so the best of those learnings was it's best that one moves on.
Wonderful. It's 6 minutes before 11 o'clock.
Hanging out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
All right, let's go to some WhatsApp voice notes.
Hi, Clement. Simon from Centurion. I went to SJ van der Merwe in Liboahomu, and our principal was Meneer Grey. And the Africans, we were forced to really talk in Afrikaans here and there. And if you did something wrong, you were asked to beg, meaning touch your knees, and then you're going to get a smack on the bum. And Liboahomu was quite rife in as far as political activities are concerned. So most people, they come from that school. I know the DG of sports, Alec Mweni, also was there. I think he was with Mpo. So I'm happy to hear that Mpo is also from SJ. I went there in 1990, so I was just 3 standards behind him. Thanks, Simon Centurion.
Thank you, Simon. I've got 2 questions here also on Eskom. You think I was not even diplomatic? Listen to what Wamza says. Clement, please can you ask Mr. Makwana there, was Pravin Gordhan interfering at Eskom? I mean, at least I said shareholder. But I think your response, you've responded to that, and I think for me that that is an answer on its own. But Wamza also wants to know, is he able to clarify on the issue of CEOs, why under his leadership the board had not provided the 3 names, because that's what Pravin was arguing the board should have done?
One of the things I hold dear as a principle is that I choose not to rule from the grave. Once I've moved on from an assignment, I have moved on. The only thing I can respond to is it is not quite accurate. 3 names were submitted. Perhaps they were not submitted in the desirable format. But I think that's where I'll leave it, that 3 names were submitted. But as at the point that I exited, a new set of names had been submitted. And I'm sure the day you have Mr. Dr. Nyati in the room, he can then expand on that in terms of his incumbency as chair of the board.
Rich on the WhatsApp line says, Clem, I'm so glad to hear Mpho Makwana is from Jane First. I went to school at Leolo in Beggarsfort, and I grew up in Khaushwane. I'm so proud of leaders like him who come from that part of the world. Rich Mkondo. Oh, that's Rich Mkondo. That's a message from Rich Mkondo. Another person says, oh, Clement, so much tranquility there. What a wise man in studio. Which university did he go to? And what qualifications did Mr. Makwana also possess? And what does he think is the most problem with Eskom? Is it state capture or systems or lack of resources or just lack of maintenance? Jeez, that's a lot of questions. The university.
Where do we start?
Let's start with university quickly.
Well, as I said already, my undergrad was at Ongoye, University of Zululand.
Did you go to tax as well?
My first postgrad was at tax, and again there my activism continued. There I got to work closely with people like Andries Snell. He was actually the president of the SRC when I was there. Well, not exactly. We had a thing called student, sort of like student resistance, something in Afrikaans that I can't recall right now immediately. But he was our leader when I was at a postgrad at Tekkies.
Yeah.
I then did postgrad qualifications elsewhere. In Chicago, I did an executive development program at the Kellogg University of Evanston, at the Kellogg Institute, Graduate School of Business. I then did 2 years postgrad in Stirling, in Scotland, in executive retail management. And in between, you do all sorts of short courses in various places.
And then, what does he think the biggest problem at Eskom is? If you can just give me one. And I know it's complex.
Eskom, when you deal with changing it, you have to firstly acknowledge that the changes that are required, that will be executed eventually, are from almost a 15-year lag. We're lagging the world more or less 15 years behind in terms of technology, whether you think of smart gridding, whether you think of smart technologies. So that is the first thing. The second thing is that perhaps it's too big, too complex. And I think what our government is doing now to almost break it into 3 units will help with a little bit of simplification, but it will remain a complex business.
Would you say interference is part of the problem?
It's a problem, but not a huge problem, in that if we just let boards do what boards should do, if we just let, even at subsidiary now, the day the NTCSA board is launched and other boards are launched of their subsidiaries, if they're just left alone to govern as they should, that's the least of our problems. The biggest of our problems is, firstly, all of us as users, we need to become user savvy. Ensure that we embrace energy efficiency, firstly. Secondly, those that can afford, ensure that you explore all those alternatives at your disposal, so that we are both able to relieve the system of the pressure that it experiences. But most importantly, as a country, we need to make bold decisions. Buildings like these ones we're in, and many around this area of Sandton, are actually underutilized power stations, if you ask me. You know, we're underutilizing rooftop solar as a solution.
Yeah. Mr. Makwana, I'm completely out of time, but thank you so much. I know. We are.
And you didn't
time
play the
flies.
other 2 songs.
Yeah. I'll play another one after the news, just before we start the next conversation. Thank you so much for making time for us.
No, thank you so much.